A man named Stanley is seen sitting in front of a doctor having a rare disease. While the doctor breaks the bad news, the narrator explains that Stanley only has 1,500 words left. This means that Stanley's rare disease has resulted in him only being able to speak 1,500 words before his death. Stanley gets angry at first as he slams the table with his hand. After lashing out in anger and wasting a few words, he starts to cry while holding the doctor. He is not in denial anymore. The doctor keeps counting his words as Stanley even attempts suicide. Once Stanley is done and finally silent, the doctor gets up and fixes the little damage Stanley had done. To top everything off, the doctor informs him that due to his negligence, he now only has 50 words left. At this point, Stanley is too stunned to say anything. The doctor then gives a sorrowful Stanley a metallic counter so that he can count his last words and use them wisely. The doctor then proceeds to write a letter as Stanley leaves. Before he exits, the doctor stops him and gives him a card and advises him that if he struggles with his problem, he can contact the number on the card. Stanley then loses 4 of his precious words when he thanks the doctor and curses for doing it. While walking back home, he is clueless about how he will reveal this to his wife, Julia. He speculates that he could use a projector to explain everything without using his words. But he reaches the conclusion that 46 words would be more than enough to keep their loving relationship going. The narrator explains that they had known each other for a very long period of time and that there is nothing more to be said anyway. Julia is also not good with big news, so Stanley decides to act normal like nothing has changed. According to Stanley, most of the time, a healthy relationship is spent in silence. 40% of the time in Stanley and Julia's relationship is spent sleeping. 10% of the time is spent eating, 3% brushing their teeth, 15% watching TV, and 2% taking out the trash. This leaves only 30%, and that time is spent watching TV together again at night. After a few days, Stanley and Julia are seen having breakfast. To avoid any awkward silence, Stanley winks at her, makes long and passionate eye contact, and even throws a few playful punches on her arm. Stanley manages to keep their relationship normal without having to say anything. She is befuddled by all of this, but she also somewhat likes it, thinking that her husband is just trying to be romantic. However, all of this started getting irritating for Julia. She has had enough of all this. Eventually, the only thing that remains in the house is silence. This silence remains constant until Julia breaks it with only 4 dreadful words, for which Stanley had been fearing all this time. In the next scene, Stanley is seen leaving the house without saying anything as Julia is closing the door. This clearly signifies that they are getting a divorce. The thing that Stanley was so afraid of has now become true. In despair, he decides to go to the place he always goes to when he feels that he needs to mourn. He goes to the woods. He started walking in the woods with 12 cans of beer. As he walks, he keeps drinking. Now, he feels a specific feeling of hopelessness that nothing in his life will ever change and that nothing matters, not even the few words he has left. During this period of guilt, he uses all of his words that were like precious gems at this point. He wasted all his words while screaming and drinking. He keeps performing these acts of imprudence until he only has 1 word left. Stanley wakes up the next day with a sense of clarity and sheer regret at what he did last night. The feeling of regret hits him like a truck as he recalls that he kept screaming Julia's name, meaning that he longs for her even at this point. This feeling points him towards his wallet as he opens it and takes a look at a picture of Julia. While looking at her picture, he spots the card that the doctor had given him earlier. The doctor advised him to call the number if he suffered, and he feels that he is suffering right now, so he decides to call the number. Feeling hopeless and not knowing what to do with his meaningless life, he goes inside a phone booth to call the number on the card. After dialing the number, an automatic bot picks up. The bot seems to know exactly what he is going through and asks how many words he has left. Stanley presses 1. The machine keeps asking questions and keeps reminding him that the button 1 is for yes and 3 for no. This gets annoying in no time. The bot then proposes that it will send a message of his choice to his lover if he types her name. Stanley makes a spelling mistake and is unable to fix it. He keeps pressing 3, but the bot does nothing. While the bot keeps saying her name incorrectly, he remembers how beautiful she was. He starts to drift into his imagination as he keeps thinking about her. The bot keeps asking if he wants more time. He screams yes out loud in anger and realizes what a grave mistake he has made. Subscribe to see more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.